I have a checklist of things that I run through in my head every single time that I look at a house, whether it's online or I'm going to see it in person. They're little things that when I catch them in the corner of my eye in a photo, I can tell things like when the house was lived in last, what kind of services it has and stuff. It's a way of gleaming information that estate agents won't necessarily know, or maybe sometimes they don't include it on the listing. So I'm going to teach you guys all of the things that I check, and then the next time you go to see a house in person or you view it online, you're going to be able to learn so much more from just the photos than you ever would by just looking at them and going, oh, that's a nice wallpaper. Oh, I don't really like that couch. So come on, we're going to start outside. So the first thing to do when you're outside your potential new house or you're looking at it online is have a look for wires leading to the house from telephone poles or ESB poles or stuff like that. They're usually going to come in at the gable end. They're going to attach to the house maybe near the chimney. And what that tells you is that the house has had electricity in the past. Now, believe me, it's not that common for every single house to have had electricity ever. Loads of houses that I feature, loads of houses I see have just never ever had it. So seeing wires going to the chimney stack or going to the gable end is a really big plus. It's not going to guarantee you that the wiring in the house is up to code or that it can even be used, but it does tell you that there has been foundation wiring in place by the ESB or by whoever was taking charge of it at the time. The house has had power at some stage in the past, and that does cut down the amount of expense you're going to have when you go to rewire the house and get it up to code. After that, I look for television aerials. So one of the reasons I do this is because if a house has had a television aerial, it has had a television. If it's had a television, there's a good chance someone lived in it in the last 20 to 30 years. This doesn't sound like a really recent amount of time to a lot of people, but to us, when we look at 200-year-old houses all the time, this is really recent. If there's a television aerial on the roof, there's a really, really good chance that it might have a toilet, it might have running water inside, it might have heating. Television was a luxury for a lot of people, so having the aerial is a really good thing, and it's a really easy thing to spot. So look out for television aerials. After that, one of my big favourites to see on the front of a house is a yard light. It's such a small thing, nobody pays any attention to it except me. But if you see a yard light on the outside of a house, the house is wired or has been wired in the past. I keep saying or has been in the past. The reason I keep saying this is it's not a given the house is safe to just switch the lights on when you go in, but it does mean that there's probably a fuse board there. There's probably a connection from the nearest ESB pole in maybe the field or on the boundary line. So again, a lot of the hard graft has been done when it comes to getting power into the house. After that, there's two things that are a little bit more modern. They don't massively concern me, but it's something I know you guys will really, really kind of get benefit, I think, from learning to spot. Have a look for one of those big green plastic oil tanks out in the backyard, because that's going to mean that there was oil heating there at some stage. Again, it's not necessarily going to be up to code, but if it's been there, then the system is in place. There might be a chance it might be able to be fixed. You might be able to just get a new burner for it. So look for the big green plastic oil tank, and that's going to be a really, really easy bet to say that there's been oil heating there. Also spot things like PVC windows, PVC guttering, because this stuff hasn't been around forever. So if you have that kind of stuff on the outside of a house, it means that some care has been taken to upgrade the house, to keep it maintained. It's definitely not a given that the inside of the house is going to be like a show home. I have gone into so many houses that have PVC windows, and it was this last ditch attempt for people to upgrade a house and to get it a little bit cozier when older people were living in it. It's not a given that the house is modern on the inside, but it does show that there was probably someone living in it up until quite recently, and that some care has been taken to maintain the house. Okay, so as we head inside, there are even more things shouting out at you about the date of the house and when it was lived in than outside. So you're going to love this stuff, okay? We're going to start in the front hall. The first thing you need to look out for is the fuse board. I know I'm talking about electricity a lot here, but it's one of those things that it's quite easy to spot in photographs, quite easy to spot when you're just wandering around in a house. So have a look and see if you can find the fuse board. if you can, there are two very distinct types of fuse boards that I see in Irish houses. There are the older ones that had like the round fuses in them and they were kind of like a china, feel to them. They're older fuse boards. And then the newer ones with the little clicky switches on them and they're white plastic and they have a little plastic door. They're generally indicative that the house has been rewired recently, and they are the holy grail when you come into a house. It's so good to see that, even if the wiring in the house isn't extensive. If you have one of those new fuse boards, there's a pretty good chance that the house has been rewired. It, of course, still needs to be checked out. Your mortgage company's going to make you do all that stuff anyway. But seeing that, it's just a really, really good sign. On the electricity still, another thing that's really easy to spot is, do you remember those brown light switches? They're like Bakelite that, we all love. They're absolutely gorgeous. And they're like circular and they've that little toggle in them. Generally, if you see them floating around a house, the house has more than likely not been rewired. Now, they even have like little plug sockets that were brown as well. So if you see them, you probably need to get the house rewired. When it comes to like hanging light pendants and stuff like that, the look of them hasn't really changed that much over the years, so they're not as easy to spot. But even in photos, when you're looking at houses online, if you see the bigger brown plastic switches, then you know that there's a bit of a chance you might need to do some work on the wiring before you move into the house. The next thing I always look out for, and this is a big one when it comes to looking at houses, keep an eye out for radiators. Now, I don't mind what age a radiator is. If I see a radiator in a house, I go, heating, yes! What that means is that you can keep your little house warm. And it's not going to be as warm as a fully insulated new build, but you have an option of keeping some heat in your house when you move into it before doing the whole thing up. So keep an eye out for radiators. They will mean there was a central heating system in the house at some stage, and that there may hopefully be a chance that you can heat the house without pulling everything out. Generally, the radiators were either hooked up to a ray burn or a solid fuel cooker. They were hooked up to the back of a fireplace, or they'll be hooked up to the oil heating tank that's outside. So all of those are really, really good things. So if you see radiators, just thank the Lord that you saw them and just be delighted that you're probably not going to have to do as much work as you would on a house that doesn't have any radiators at all. So moving from the living room, the next thing that I'll always look for is a kitchen sink. Comes second only to a toilet for me in a house like this. A kitchen sink is one of those things that shows you that the house has had water running in it. So there is more than likely a water source with the house. It is not always a given that the well that the house is connected to is on your land. So it does still need to be checked. But if you're narrowing down searches, keep in the houses that have a kitchen sink. It doesn't matter how crappy it looks. It doesn't matter if it's one of them old chipboard units with the metal on the top of the doors. Don't even care. Once you see a sink, just thank God that there's a sink in it. Then the next thing after that, I suppose, would be probably the toilet. Now, I know a toilet and a bathroom to a lot of people is just a given. In old houses, it isn't, especially in Ireland. Don't even ask me what they did before it, because I don't even want to think about it. But if you have a toilet, apart from the fact that it tells you that there's water in the house because you have to have water to run the toilet, it also tells you that there's somewhere for them to get rid of what comes out of the toilet. So there is either a septic tank somewhere, or there is some sort of a waste removal system in place. Now, again, you're not looking at what quality the septic tank is. It doesn't tell you things like that. It doesn't tell you the age of it. It doesn't tell you how well it's been maintained. It doesn't tell you anything like that. But it does say that there is a way of you hopefully going to the loo on the weekends when you're in there working, or if you're really struggling and your little house that you buy, you have to move into straight away, which is what I had to do. It just means that you can go to the loo once you've had it checked and you make sure that everything's kind of working and the tank has been emptied and stuff. So this is why every time I put up a post that there's a toilet on, I go, toilet! Yes, it's because it's so important. It's an expensive enough thing to put in. It's not the end of the world. It's far from the most expensive thing you're going to put into a house, but it's really, really nice if you see it in the photos that there's a toilet there, or even look in the listings and it'll go 3 beds, 1 bath. Then you're like, toilet, sorted. I'm done with that bit. So that's it. They're my biggest things then for the bathroom and the kitchen. One thing I really, really like to keep an eye out for on houses as well is, do you know when you have like older people living in a house and they have mobility aids, they have like handles beside the shower or beside the bath, or you'll see like a walker in the corner and things like that. A lot of people look at them and they kind of get a bit sad about it, and they think, oh God, you know, someone lived there and probably more than likely has passed on from the house. You need to look at these things with a little bit of positivity. When I see them, especially when I see wet rooms and things like that, the thing that cries out to me is that somebody who was older lived in this house, and somebody in their family went to a huge amount of effort to upgrade the house so that they could live in it in their later years. Now, if you have a wet room and you have a handle on it on the wall, and you might have like a walk-in frame in the corner, when I look at that, I'm seeing a quite modern bathroom setup that you could use very, very easily. Probably was put in the last 10 years, so it's going to be really, really up to code. And instead of looking at it as a bad thing, look at it as a plus. As soon as you start seeing mobility kind of helps and stuff like that in houses, just look at it as there being a really, really good chance that upgrades have been made to the house recently, and that there's a chance that maybe it will take a little bit of the work off of you moving forward when you're doing up the house. I think last but not least, the only other thing I keep an eye out for in houses is like possessions that you can date easily. So this is great fun to do when you're looking through pictures online, because everyone likes a good snoop. Everyone likes to kind of zoom in and have a look and see what's in the backgrounds of the pictures. I love seeing a calendar on the wall, because when someone lives in a house consistently, there's, especially the older generation, there's a lot of a chance that they're going to have a calendar from like the local mart or the local hardware shop or something, or the local newspaper up on the wall every single year. Seeing when the last calendar was put up is a really, really good sign as to when someone lived in it full time in the past. Seeing things like even packaging off of stuff, like you come into a kitchen and you could be like, oh God, this kitchen has so many possessions in it, and it's a bit, oh, I don't know. I find some people get weirded out by that, by there being possessions all over the place and there being contents in the house, but you need to use the contents as a way of gleaming information about the history of the house. So if you see a packaging on a box of cornflakes that hasn't been around for 20 years, or you see a newspaper sitting on a table, check the date of it. You know, there's no point in looking at newspapers in the bottom of drawers that more than likely could have lined them 20 or 30 years ago and never been changed. But look at stuff that's on the kitchen table. Look at stuff that's in the presses. That's the kind of stuff that's going to teach you when the house was last lived in. And that's a really, really important thing when you're trying to figure out how well the house has been taken care of and how much damage might have happened to the parts of the house that you can't see as easily as this. And that's it. So the next time you go to a viewing of a house or you're looking at one online, use the list of things that we've just gone through, and they're going to just put so much more information at your disposal and put you in a little bit of a stronger position when it comes to the questions you're asking about the house, and even like the offer you make on the house. Knowing things like what services the house might have, knowing like when it was last lived in, knowing the amount of work you're going to need to do. These are really, really big things. And it's not always the houses you expect that tick all the boxes of what we have here. You could see a house that's up for 30,000 and on the outside it looks absolutely terrible, but if you see a yard light and you see wires going to the gable end and you see radiators inside, the inside might be messy, but if there's radiators and a toilet and a bathroom sink and a kitchen sink, this is stuff that is going to put you in a stronger position when it comes to getting your forever home.